Welcome to Grid Chat, the motorsports podcast where it doesn't matter how you found F1 or any other motorsport, you are welcome here. I am your host, Marissa Tandon, and today I have a very fun guest to join me. Jordan is very visibly on the screen if you're watching the video, but if you're just listening to audio, you can't hear her waving and smiling and looking like a cutie. But you can hear her laughing. See, I made it work.
Yes.
Jordan is a London-based content creator. She runs a travel and lifestyle blog, and she makes some really good F1 content. And she lives in the heat of the action, which I'm very jealous of. But she's also an American content creator based in London. So, the best of both worlds. Welcome to the show, Jordan. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
I'm super excited to have you here because I think I like every fandom, F1 has like this space where you start making content and then you start connecting with people. And we've just been sort of like DMing and chatting like we know each other in real life, which we don't. But you know what? One day.
Hey, next time I'm on the West Coast, I'll come say hi.
Honestly, yeah. Next time I'm in London, I'll be there. So there we go.
Absolutely.
We can go to Lewis's vegan.
Oh, one of them shut down. The one near my house shut down.
Did it really?
It did.
Oh no.
It was in the mall and we went one day and it was like gone. And I was just like,
have you been? Is it any good? Like have you been to one of the other ones? Yeah.
The milkshakes are really good. The fries are good. The burgers are kind of like depends on where you go. But
okay.
It was good.
Fair enough.
I would go again.
Okay, yeah. I thought about going when I was in London last because I was just in London in December and I was like, should I try this vegan burger joint? And then I was like, I don't eat vegan food. Like I don't have a problem with vegan food, but I eat meat. So
yeah.
Do I want and here's the other problem. The reason I don't eat a lot of like veggie vegan food, we're so off topic already. Is because I have this thing about food masquerading as other food.
That is fair.
It doesn't even matter if it's like a cake masquerading as like a Lunchable. Like I don't like it. It feels like you're trying to trick me.
Like and not chicken nuggets.
Yeah. Like, and also I don't know if they do this in London, but in LA, the place where people like to make lots of kitschy things, they love to call it's spelled CHIKN. And I, for the longest time, thought this was just a trendy haha. No. And so I ordered it one time and I was like, what is this? And they were like, oh, it's like fake chicken. I was like, well, then why would you call it chicken? Why wouldn't you just call it tofu chicken, or whatever like you put it? Nuggets. Yeah, fake chicken.
They do that here too. Vegetables. And it bugs me because I'm like, no, I just wanted chicken nuggets. Because as someone who chronically will buy them just as like a survival meal, I have bought the wrong ones once or twice. And
then what are you supposed to do? You know what I mean? And also, I don't love a mushroom. So a lot of times they're like, here's a whole mushroom and that's your burger patty.
Maybe you go for the fries and the milkshakes. And then that's the Lewis vegan restaurant experience.
That's so true. Yeah. I am lactose intolerant, so that it would be ideal.
Yeah, that's fair. They were actually really good. I was surprised. I was like, oh, I would eat the whole thing with this.
Well, I don't know if this was a positive ad for Lewis's food. I can't even remember the name of it. So
I think he should sponsor your podcast now.
You know what? I'm available. Hit me up. I will eat something. I'll eat something from there. I like
when
vegetables.
You come to London, we can do a whole episode from there eating the food. I think that's a perfect idea.
It'll be like our version of Chicken Shop. Chicken Shop date. But CHIKN shop date. Technically, if we can stop giggling, Jordan is actually here to help me recap Bahrain. So I guess we should get into that.
I think we can do that.
Yeah, I think we could do it. We're not gonna go blow by blow, but there are some highlights that I think are worth hitting. Whether you watched the race or you didn't, I think there's things that we can talk about and break down. First and foremost, though, I don't know if you knew this. This is the first race in the history of F1 that every car, not the first race. This is the first season opening race in the history of F1 where every car that started finished.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking at the end. I was like, I had predicted a safety car or two for fantasy, and I was like, why did everybody finish?
Yeah.
This is really painful for my standings.
But I was surprised too.
Happy everybody finished. There were some touch and go moments.
did you have like predictions of which cars you thought weren't going to finish?
I didn't think that Williams was going to finish, and I didn't think I was predicting at least one Ferrari mishap.
Honestly, I think we were close with Charles' like brake issues, but
it didn't happen apparently.
Didn't happen. He did finish. I also sort of thought it was a possibility we would see an Alpine DNF, but we just saw a really bad performance from Alpine as opposed to a DNF. So.
To be fair, I think the only reason they really recovered that race is because Logan had that minute-long stop, and then Valtteri had that really long pit stop.
52 seconds. I was like, well, that's one of the highlights we definitely have to talk about. So Valtteri relived some trauma from his past, because if you are unaware, he also holds the record for the longest pit stop ever, which I'm not sure is a record you want to hold. But back in 2021 at Monaco, he had to take a pit stop, and they could not get the front left tire off of his car for 36 hours. Obviously, the race had completed, so he just DNF'd. But yeah, they tried for 2 days to get that wheel off. And this race, he had a 52-second pit stop.
That's insane.
Were you watching live when you
watched
that?
We were.
Yeah. How did you? You were actually in a group, like at a bar.
Yeah.
Was there a reaction to just watching him sit in his little Shigo car and not move?
We were all just like watching him sit there. We're like, what is going on? And then like seeing the car and seeing them trying to, like, I think the brakes were not cooling down? Like, what was the issue with the car?
I actually don't know if they ever said what the official issue was. I just know he was sitting there long enough that I thought they might bring him like a cup of tea. You know what I mean? Like,
they could have done a whole front ring replacement. They could have done a lot of things, but it didn't seem like a lot was going on.
It was honestly one of those, like, I'm waiting for someone to do like a Curb Your Enthusiasm or type of edit where it's just like the music and he's just sitting there and not moving. Like,
I need someone to do like the Jeopardy, like do just like overlay it over him just sitting and just being like twiddling his thumbs.
Yeah, calling all fan editors. If you have got the music and the Zoom, we're looking for you. We want to giggle. Honestly, you know who I'm surprised hasn't done something like this yet is James Coker, who's on. If you follow him, I think he's so funny. But yeah, I'm waiting. I'll have to send him a message after this and be like, "We're waiting for your edit. Where is it? Drop the jokes,
please."
So that's honestly, I was bummed for Valtteri because I honestly really like Valtteri. I miss him from his Mercedes days. I thought replacing him with George personally has still never been a good decision to me, and I think it was a big part of what started the downfall of Lewis, like leaving Mercedes.
I agree with that.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
Yeah,
like the Lewis and George dynamic is very different than like him and Valtteri. Like they might have had their moments, but there was always, I think it's just different than now.
I think Valtteri is just a team player in an extreme way, and so it was hard to watch him not be rewarded for that, I guess, because I think it's sort of, if you watch basketball or you like know basketball lore, to me it's the Scottie Pippen Michael Jordan situation where Michael very much says like, I wouldn't have won my championships without Scottie, and like you need someone who is talented and willing to take that second position. Exactly. And Valtteri wasn't happy about it. We have plenty of memes, but he did recognize that was the call that was being made and follow them. And George, I don't know that he does.
He doesn't do that. Yeah. And as much as I acknowledge that he's very competitive and he's in a great car, he's doing really well, especially like last season and this season, like, well, so far. But at sometimes you do have to just be a team player, and that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to come in second every time, like sometimes.
Yeah. Honestly, every time. Like if we're 1-2 and also especially for George, the thing that I guess we're gonna talk about my problems with George Russell.
It's fine.
I think the thing with George is it's like you have so much time left in your career, and you have so much that you could learn from genuinely the greatest driver of all time, and you're choosing to kind of whine on the radio where we can all hear you.
It's like why does he have to pass me? Why can't he move?
Yeah. So I don't know. So it makes me bummed to watch Valtteri kind of, have I hope that him and his bleached mullet have a better season after this time.
My thing with Valtteri is like, I think he's just here for the vibes at this point, and I think it's okay. And I think he's very much so like, if I'm not in a seat, I will go and live my best life with his fiance. I think now at this point, like on their cycling tours and like living their best lives. Like he'll enter a whole Valtteri Bottas mullet cycling era, not F1, just cycling.
And I can see that. I think when he does complete his journey, I think I honestly just think he's one of the funniest drivers on the grid. Just genuinely everything he does, every moment he does like an interview, he shows up, he does every photo and little meme that he intentionally posts. Yeah. I just every time I'm like, I think you could have a reality TV show and I think I would watch it. Like I think I would watch every episode in an extreme way.
It'd be fantastic. I would love to see it.
Well, hopefully he'll do a tour around the world and we'll get to watch his bike.
I think it'd be great.
Drama, I suppose. Well, Valtteri, if you're listening, we have your retirement plan whenever you're ready. We don't want you to retire, but we do have an idea.
Not Tour de France, Tour de Valtteri.
He also, I will say, is one of the drivers that is rumored to potentially be returning to Mercedes for
I can see that because like they need someone who's been there, who's been with the team. They need someone who's like a bit older. Like not that George doesn't have experience at this point, but like he doesn't have experience like leading a team. Yeah. He doesn't have experience with like actively maintaining and like giving the feedback that's necessary to make a new car like they're going to have in 26 an actual championship car.
Yeah, I think at this point, I think it'll depend on what happens this season, but I do think George is like lacking the ability to be the first driver and sort of train someone else as well. So I think there's the fact that Toto said that he was holding that seat for Kimi Antonelli and potentially bringing him on, which personally I wouldn't have admitted out loud. I just think I would have kept that to myself. but I think that would be too young of a team for Mercedes, especially because they're in such a transitionary period with the car.
Absolutely agree. Because like they're going to need so much work on that car in 26 and beyond. Like you need someone who's experienced with like building an F1 car and making it good. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. And that would be Kimi's first season pretty much in F1. That's a lot of pressure to put on him, no matter how good he is. Like,
agreed.
And it's too much pressure.
Yeah, and if George were in a place where it's like, okay, he really can teach you, he knows what he's doing with this car, he knows how to help, and maybe this season is the season that he kind of gets to that point. But I think comparatively to like the other two rookies that came in with him, with Lando and Alex, I just don't know that. I would say George is kind of like the one out of the three that isn't ready to lead a team yet.
He was at Williams for he was at Williams for not too long, but like for a really long time. And like Williams at that time was Williams. Yeah. And that's all I'm going to say on that. And like Lando had Daniel for a little bit. He's had a couple people kind of like nurture him into this like leadership driver. And like Oscar's also not like, Oscar's a very kind of different caliber of teammate than I think a lot of people would have coming into a new seat.
Yeah.
And then Alex has had his Toro Rosso time, his Red Bull time, and like that in itself was chaotic.
True. Yeah, I think I think Alex is very much in a position where he can continue to lead Williams or take a higher seat. Lando obviously has been in a good position with McLaren for a long time, and especially the season especially the stint of time where he was driving with Daniel, and Daniel was not performing in a very good way at that time. I think that's also sort of honestly to some degree like ego boosting. It gives you the ability to say like, okay, one of the better drivers on the grid that I've been watching is I'm outperforming him in the same car. So I think Lando, as hard as he is on himself very often in interviews about his talent, which I think he has, obviously it's just undeniable. Absolutely. I think that helps. I think it helps to have a stretch of time where you're doing better than a driver that like you watched for a really long time.
For sure. And like I think George had a little bit of that when the car was really, really bad when he first came to Mercedes. And like I think there's a level of that ego being really, really good and helping you mature as a driver, but then also when it goes to your head and it's not really the fact that like you're doing better than your teammate, it's just the car is really bad. I think there's a difference. Because
I agree.
That car was really, really bad.
Ugh,
yeah. And I think he let that Brazil win kind of get to him, especially last season. Because like the shift between 2022 and 2023 was drastic.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so that gives us we've talked about some of the like funny parts about the race, but I also think we have to acknowledge, which I hate to acknowledge, but the age of Max is back once again. And he finished the race 22.4 seconds ahead of second place, and second place was in fact Checo in the same car. So very clearly we're back to where we've been. Yeah.
It's going to be a painful season.
The thing that is so wild to me about this consistent 22.4 30 second like long switch is one thing that I don't think we acknowledge, right? Like it is a bummer and I'm bummed about it. But there is enough competition in the rest of the race that if you just sort of like close it, you don't see it. I do not see one first. It's still an exciting race. And I think there's been like this conversation of like, are people going to stop watching F1 if Max doesn't stop winning every race? And I don't think that's the truth.
I think they've done better. Like, well, it's only been one race, but I think yesterday was a bit better than last season where they just showed Max in his car just lapping the field the entire time. You're just like, can you please see something else besides this? And I think yesterday, at least they were like, okay, we're going to give you a little bit of sick F1. We're going to give you the Chico car. We're going to give you Logan running off to the side. We're going to give you all of the good stuff going on Charles's radio and all of their VR checking.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good benefit because the race for second is on, the race for third, fourth, and fifth are on, especially both for drivers and constructors. And I'm excited to see what comes of that.
Same. Yeah. And I also think I think you make such a good point. The directors, the actual F1 TV directors have gotten a little bit better at figuring out how to call the shots and make it more of an exciting watch this season, at least just from this one race.
Yeah. We'll see.
So we'll see. And also calling live sports, like directing live sports is such a talent and such a difficult thing. I remember the first time I was in a control room watching people do this. It's fascinating because they have so much coverage. They have so many cameras. And obviously what I was watching was like a basketball game. So that's a little bit more action heavy in terms of like close up action that you can watch. Obviously F1, like they're calling so many cameras. They're trying to figure out how to follow racetrack of like usually like 3 miles plus, and there's 20 different drivers. You're trying to figure out like where's the most interesting. Normally for a director, I would assume the most interesting would be at the front of the field. And so they're used to calling that, which I think is part of why last season was so boring to watch. But it does seem like they're calling the others.
I don't think anybody was really expecting Max to like finish 20 seconds ahead of everybody almost every single race last season.
Yeah.
With few exceptions. So it made sense last season, but I think this season, especially with how Bahrain went, it will continue to be a situation that we're going to deal with. But to be fair, something might change. Yeah. He might start making slip-ups. Checo might figure it out.
Sure. I love your optimism.
This is my year of delusional things. And I think thinking that someone will challenge Max is purely delusional. I don't think it'll actually happen. Rational side of me is no, he's going to lap the field every race.
Yeah. It's fair. Between testing, between free practice, and Max complaining over the radio, and then just showing up at qualifying. Did you feel maybe someone's gonna take it? Maybe the car suddenly is not that good.
I think that actually might be the thing. I think Max will not qualify as well. I think he'll always qualify really, really high. Yeah. But I think that the other cars have really good one lap pace that might make it difficult for him to qualify and get pole every weekend.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's where we might see a bit of a shakeup, but then I think he'll still lap the field the rest of it.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think
their multi-lap pace was crazy.
Yeah. I think we saw like Daniel Ricciardo had a great lap time in one of the best lap times in one of free practices. We saw like I think a lot of teams do have good single lap pace, which is a step towards, like, I know last year when I was at COTA, like Max qualified lower, and it made the race more exciting because you're watching him at least fight through the race, and then he wins by 20 seconds, but it's still fun.
Fight through the field, and then everyone's just like,
let me just move out of your way.
Please don't crash into me. Please don't hit me.
Good Lord. Yeah, it's like, he's going to make it to the front, but like, will we at least have some races where he starts maybe fourth? Further back?
I think it'll happen a couple times.
Yeah.
That's my prediction.
Fingers crossed. It's a good prediction, I think. And then also, I do have to point this out. Not only did he win by 22.4 seconds, he lapped the entire back half of the grid, and Logan Sargent, he lapped twice.
I felt so bad for Logan yesterday. I think he had such a hard time last season. He has my heart. And to figure out that wasn't even a him problem, that was a car problem, that hurt.
It sucks because it's like, for him, I'm like, I want you to do well because you just seem like a nice guy. Like, I know that's not a reason to root for someone, but I'm like, sometimes I'm like, well, you know what, to be fair, I do want to see an American on the grid. I like watching Logan, and I think obviously there was argument about whether or not that seat should have been his this season. And I think the one thing that I will say for Logan is you can really tell that in between seasons, he really, really, really tried to improve. He put on 5 kilos of muscle.
Yeah. After Qatar, because he said it, I forget what I was listening to. He was doing some interview. It was during testing. He was talking to the Sky commentators, and he was like in the box with them, and he was saying how like after Qatar, or even just in general over the season, he lost 2.5 kilos like over the course of the season. So he's put on 5 total, but like 2.5 was making up all of the weight, like the weight he's lost throughout last season. Yeah. I think that's a lot of weight.
It is
for anybody to lose.
Yeah, and I think like you could hear his heart breaking when they called him in at Qatar, I think, because you were listening to James say like, look,
it's okay.
And, it's okay. It's fine. Take care of yourself. Bring it in if you need to bring it in. And that race itself was dangerous. It was too hot.
Like, I'm surprised they didn't, like, I still say this. I'm surprised that they didn't just call the race early because so many of them were sick. And like, I think Williams was at the point where they were just like, we would rather you bring the car in and retire than you pass out midway through the race and crash. And then since you're crashed, you might die.
Yeah.
And I think they would much rather have an alive driver who's well and just has heat stroke versus like a driver in a coma, which is not an easy choice to make. But like, I think that's part of like why I really like James, the team principal, because like there are probably certain team principals who would not have made the same choice. Some of the other drivers were talking about how they were like seeing spots and like when they were turning, they had like black spots on the sides. And it's like, that's at some point, like you have to call people in and like make a safety decision.
Ultimately, when you listen to the drivers talk about that race, I think it was the wrong call to continue the race. And I think like mentally it caused Logan like this feeling of inadequacy is the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And while he didn't have a great rookie season, he had a bad rookie season. We can all admit that. And I think that's okay to say. It's not mean, it's the truth. But I think he left last season and came back this season and was like, he sort of had like the breakup, like the revenge pod kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yes. And like, I think the thing I always say for Logan is like the difference between him and like Oscar, like both coming in as rookies. Oscar had multiple years as a reserve driver. He had multiple years as a test driver. Like he's had so much experience with an F1 car where it was a bit easier for him to transition into that McLaren seat.
Yeah.
Logan didn't have any of that coming into F1. And so like, I understand he was really bad at the beginning. Like I feel like most people would be transitioning from where he was to a brand new F1 car where you have no idea what's going on. It's not like the Williams was the most technologically savvy of any of the cars. It was probably a really difficult car to handle at some points because every year they come to testing and it's like, we finished the car like 3 days before testing.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't think that if you had put Oscar or many rookies in the same position, they would have done well or like perfectly either.
Yeah. I think
and
also
it's really
like
hard to compare them.
I'm also kind of thinking we're going to see something similar with Leah Block in F1 Academy.
Yeah.
Because she is such a great driver in the series that she's been driving in. This is her first time in a single seater. And we're seeing like the preseason racing that she's doing. She's really coming in the back half and she's just trying to learn how to control a completely different car. And I think that that's something that like those expectations that are set just because you make it, but you don't have like the preparation that's necessary. Yeah. I think that's going to be something that we continue to see. Like the test driving is important, having that space to spend time training with a team. And I think this season I'm hopeful, despite being lapped twice, which we have to say was a car problem and not his fault. I think like despite that, I'm hoping that we get to see like his comeback. I want to see him kind of have a redemption arc this year.
I think he will. And like, I think by the end of last season, you could kind of tell that he was figuring it out. Like, even if it wasn't perfect and he still had his moments where he would spin out or he would hit the wall or something, like make small mistakes. Like, but in terms of lap pace, in terms of keeping up with Alex, in terms of like, even for qualifying for some of the back end of the season, like he was figuring it out. And I think this season was not the best of starts, but I think it's only been one race. Like the Williams is a hard car to drive. It's a new steering wheel. Like I heard that his car, like his steering wheel switched settings by itself. That was what happened.
Oh my God.
And that was why he couldn't turn. And so like, that's why he went off. And I'm like, because they have a new steering wheel this year.
Yeah.
Years they were the only team that didn't have the one with the screen built into the steering wheel. And so like, this is a completely different situation for them. And I'm like, this is just going to be painful.
Speaking of, I would say like, have you seen the clips of everyone talking about, like F1 calls itself the pinnacle of motorsport and then it's the different screenshots? My favorite screenshot to come out of this race is the one that has the screen on the wheel and it just says car too hot.
Or like Lewis, my seat just broke. And I'm like, what do you mean your seat broke? Like hearing him explain that yesterday was hilarious.
I just okay, we have to talk about Lewis and his I put my 2 weeks notice in energy already.
Bro, oh my God.
It was like,
he was checked out.
Just honestly, look, I have never, when you compare his interviews last season, his post-race interviews last season to his post-race interviews at Bahrain, I have never seen a man who finished 7th laugh and giggle so much.
Lewis Hamilton last year, he'd be pissed if he finished anything below like 5th. But then this year, he's like, listen, my seat, bro, my butt cheek was in the air for half the race.
He's like, my seat's broken. I don't work here. Like, it's like he was truly giving me those when they were asking him questions post race. He was giving the energy of like when you accidentally go up to someone who's wearing a red shirt in a Target and you think they're an employee and he's there and you're like, where's this? And they're like, I don't work here. And you're like, oh, but you're wearing the uniform for fun.
And they're like,
I don't work here anymore. So
he's serving out his notice period. I think he just knows that car isn't like super competitive like they would want. Like, I think he saw Max finish 22.4 seconds ahead of everybody. He's like, literally, I don't care anymore.
Does this look like a man who cares? It's not. It's like a man who couldn't care less. The best clip that he gave to the best soundbite, there's two actually. Number one was they asked him about the car and he said the car is reliable.
Oh yeah, I saw that and I was just like,
reliably gonna finish late, I suppose. And also, what's reliable about your butt hanging out of your car? Because that to me seems unreliable.
Yeah, okay, just a bit, like
just a little.
I think when I saw like the Williams having issues and like George was apparently having power unit issues as well, I was like, literally, what is going on with that? with the Mercedes team right now.
Yeah. And then the other soundbite that he has is the I believe it's the Sky Sports commentators gave their like predictions of where everyone's gonna finish, and someone rated him like 7th or 8th, and then that same commentator was interviewing him, and they asked a question, and Jordan, he doesn't answer the question at all. He goes, yeah, actually, let me pull you up on something. You rated me really low on those predictions, and you can't see the commentator, but I can hear his heart drop into his stomach.
You could just see, like, he probably just blanched, and like he just probably saw his life flash before his eyes. Like,
it was like, do? Well, what would you do? First of all, if you had brazenly rated Lewis Hamilton is going to finish 7th or 8th this year, and,
that is rude,
right? And then you have to interview him. You know you're going to be in front of him. I don't know if it's that you think like people don't like they don't go on the internet, they don't see these things, but we know for a fact that these drivers know. That's the other thing. All of you need to be careful with your memes. The drivers know the memes. They're aware of the internet.
Lewis is chronically online. Like, for a man who is like vegan, living my best life, like not like
that like man blowing is on in the breeze. Twitter on nonstop.
Like the Almave like logo thing that was his header for a while. I was like, bro, where did you find this from the depths of your Twitter mentions?
Honestly, the thing that scares me the most about Lewis Hamilton is one day if you ever have a chance to meet him, he's gonna probably reference something you posted online.
Stop.
So, can you imagine? Oh my God. I would genuinely wonder, like, does he have someone on staff whose job it is to just like make a PowerPoint of all of the memes that he might need to see? Do you know what I mean? Because if so, that's what I do all the time anyway. So if you are looking for someone to put on payroll for that, Lewis, I am available.
Hey, listen. Either you or me, because like I can make a really good PowerPoint. I am chronically online as well. This is my pitch for a new job.
Listen, the internet is a big place. We are willing to double team this.
Please.
You may need to.
It would be great. And we work really well together, if you can't tell.
It's very true. And I have to say that Meryl Streep in The Devil Wears Prada needed 2 assistants. And if you want to be like someone, why wouldn't you want to be like Meryl Streep? So,
exactly. The Devil Wears Prada is a classic.
So in addition to Lewis's eminent move and his 2-week notice energy, on the flip side of that decision, we have Carlos, who is trying to make you regret taking a second wife. And it was, honestly, I think he's going to have one of his better seasons, possibly his best season yet.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree with that wholeheartedly.
We had him, he, first of all, like, took 3rd. Great. Podium. He also passed Charles. I cannot speak when I have to say his name properly. And then it's fine. Like, I feel intense about it, but I do need everyone to know that, like, I had to drop out of 9th grade French. So it's hard for me to speak this way. Very academic about everything other than my French pronunciation.
And then there's me, who's like, salut, je parle très bien français. And I'm like, boom.
So there you go. You know what I mean? I'll just let you say.
We can just switch when you need to say like Charles Leclerc. I can just like.
There you go. Charles Leclerc. It's a beautiful name. I just can't say it properly. And I just feel like I'm butchering it. You know what I mean? And then when I was in Vegas, there were so many people calling him Charles Leclerc. Charles Leclerc.
The Miami, was it LL Cool J? And Charles Chuck Leclerc? Who said it? Or was it? No, that was a joke that Max had said. I think someone else did it.
I think he was referencing Miami. Yeah. Was it the announcer when they were coming in and doing their little? I can't remember. Oh, was it?
I think so.
I wouldn't put it past him.
I remember,
but I don't want
really random things.
I genuinely wouldn't put past him. I love him. Anyway, Charles was having some pretty extreme brake issues, it did seem, during the race, but yeah. Carlos zoomed right past him. Quick pass.
He had to pass him twice too.
Yeah, he did. How are you feeling about Carlos? Where do you think he's going to end up?
I think I agree with that. He'll end up higher than Charles. I don't know where he'll end up next season. I think it'll be interesting to see. But I think, especially his last season at Ferrari, I think he's really going to make them regret picking Lewis.
Yeah.
It is what it is. We'll see how it happens.
Yeah, the thing that's interesting about it is I just feel like to some degree, it's like there are only 2 drivers on the grid that you could be like, "Look, I get it. I'll go find another place to go," and it's Max and Lewis. And like, if you woke up and you were an F1 driver and you found out, "Hey, Max Verstappen's taking your seat next year," what can you do about that? You know what I mean? Like, what argument is there to have? And similarly with Lewis. And so I feel like for Carlos, it sucks, but I also feel like he has to be like, I mean, if they called me, I would make the swap. Like,
I feel like all of them would get it.
Yeah.
It makes perfect sense. Someone made a point yesterday when we were watching Bahrain, like, I think he could actually end up in that Red Bull seat.
Carlos moving to Red Bull would make sense if I believed that Red Bull wanted someone to challenge Max. And I don't...
That is a good point.
You know what I mean? I don't know that that's what they want. I think when you look at the choices that they're making, I think the reason why Danny Rick is my call for that seat next year is that they're looking for someone who's willing to support Max and never expect to take a win himself. Yeah. And I think there's also this morning big rumor that Max might go to Mercedes, which maybe
I don't see that. George would have a conniption. George would actually light Brackley on fire if that happened. I don't think Toto would ever really they would fight so bad. We would have it wouldn't be Brosadies, it wouldn't be Britsadies anymore. It would be like the Dutch and the British fighting it out.
Yeah.
Every weekend.
I think the thing about it is it depends on how much they care about George's vibes. Like, George's contract will also be up at that point. Or not in 2025. It'll be up at the end of 2025. So it'd only be one season over. And I think it would the issue I see with Max moving is not necessarily George, because I don't know how much they're going to prioritize George's feelings over Max. But I think Max is not moving until Mercedes gets that car under control, because he's not going to come in and drive a bad car.
No, and he's like, I think Max can do the building of the car if he really wanted to. But like, to be fair, they've even made that very clear. That's part of why they've kept Checo so long. Yeah. Because Checo is really good at the feedback aspect of it, that you need to build a championship winning car.
Yeah.
And I think, if anything, I know we all are saying like Checo isn't going to stay in the seat, but like, if Checo gets it under control and doesn't just end up like last season where he was like 10th, 11th, 12th, like chronically throughout that middle portion of the season, if he continually is like second, even third or fourth a couple times, I think he could stay realistically.
Yeah.
Maybe until 25, 26.
I wouldn't be shocked if he did stay, if he can manage to like have a good show of the first half of the season. But I think it might be difficult for them to decide to do that, because I wonder how much they look at the fact that pretty much the entire grid is up for grabs this year.
Yeah. It's
so
a
like,
lot of
it's
a lot of people. I don't think Alex will go. I don't think Pierre will go.
Yeah, I agree with
no matter how much Pierre hates Alpine. I don't think either of them will actually go back to the Red Bull institution.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I agree.
Like, who else though? Like, Lando's on an infinite contract.
Yeah, so Lando and Oscar are locked. So McLaren's locked, Ferrari's locked. Alonso's up for grabs. Though I kind of feel like he might, if Aston Martin has a good season this season, I see him kind of staying.
I agree with that. If they want him, I think he would stay.
And I think he has a good relationship with Lance, and I think he has a good relationship with the team in general. And there's a level of like, Lance is young and willing to learn, as much as I think people give Lance Stroll so much grief. And I think he really loves the sport and wants to do well. Like, I think it sucks. Obviously, whatever. It's a nepotistic thing. But like, as much as he's not necessarily
a nepotistic sport.
It's exactly. It's a nepotistic sport. This one is just a more like visible situation. Like, okay, yeah, his dad bought the team. But like, I think Lance wants to be there, and I think he has matured over the last season. I I think he wants to learn from Fernando. I think he likes working with him. They had a very cute moment in the garage after the race where he like kind of was like hugging him and was like, "Are you happy you're not at Alpine now?" Like,
oh, I saw that.
Yeah, it was sweet. I mean, like obviously, they're talking a little bit of trash, but I think they have a good relationship, and I could see Fernando staying.
I can see him staying because like if they want him, I don't think he would go anywhere else because I think he's not too old for the Red Bull seat, but like I think at this point in his career, I don't really think even though he would be great in that seat and he would be really great in a really good car, I don't think he wants to deal with like the crazy psychological like politics of a Red Bull like garage.
I agree. Yeah, I think it's like why put yourself through that if you don't have to, like I don't know.
He would retire. Yeah. You want Fernando Alonso to retire? Go put him in a Red Bull.
Put him in a Red Bull seat. You know what I mean? Like
I do think they could pull someone from F2 or like someone from another team's reserve drivers though, if they go full Winnie, like someone from Aston or from McLaren or Alpine's even.
Yeah.
Like reserve driver track, because none of them are really going to get a seat either.
I agree with that. Yeah, I think they've got a lot of options for who comes with Max. I think Carlos is a possibility, but it only is a possibility if they're looking to have some competition between the two drivers. And if they're only looking for someone who's going to fully support that seat, like that Max situation, I don't think Carlos is the right choice.
No.
And I want to see Carlos do well, to be honest. Like I'd like to see him go somewhere where he can be a competitor,
I think he could go to Stake for a year and then go to Sauber.
Yeah, I could see that.
It's not his best move, but it's like you're there already. You get to meet the team. It's a move, and then you're there in 26 when they change the regs and the new team comes in.
Yeah, and they become Audi. Yeah, I could see it. The last beef of the race, we'll say, is whatever's going on in the house of VCARB because Danny, Rick, and Yuki. So if you missed it and you were watching the race and you saw the call and you were confused, we're going to break it down for you. Basically, Yuki was in front of Danny Rick. He was chasing Kevin Magnussen in a Haas to, pass and kind of continue moving up the grid. They were both not in the points at that point. And he was given team orders to let Danny Rick pass and to chase him. Some people may have been confused by the call. At first, I was confused by the call about why they were making this call at this point. Yuki seemed to have good pace. It seemed a little late in the race to be making this call. However, the problem was really that Danny had newer tires. He had, I think he had softs on. Now I see.
Yeah, he had new softs.
Yeah, he had new softs on.
Yeah, he had new softs.
So Danny had new softs on. He had the potential to catch K-Mag and to keep moving up more than Yuki did. He just had a better car. And I heard actually after the race that this was a strategy that had been discussed before the race. I don't know if that's true, but it is what I've been hearing lately. So if that is true, it seems if that is true, it seems even more of a problem on Yuki's part to have known that this was a possibility and to behave the way that he did. But
I think he probably wasn't expecting it to just go to be that late in the race because it was like what 53 or 57 or something crazy.
Yeah, it was a late. In my opinion, it was a late call. I guess we also don't know if they delayed on the broadcast, like the radio message, and we do know that Yuki delayed making the move, like swap. Making that swap. And so with that delay, it became a pretty much useless call. I think if Yuki had followed team orders as soon as they happened, there's a possibility Danny might have at least caught one more position. I think it was a call that probably should have been made earlier on, but we also don't know because we don't have like constant stream of team radio how long they had been telling him we need to make this move before it was put on TV. So I don't know, but Yuki's decision to then in the cool down lap after some choice words on the broadcast to in the cool down lap, race is over, everything's done. We just need to get these cars off track and move on to sort of he kind of, if you watch footage of it, he just sort of dive bombs. He comes up and gets very close intentionally and then zooms past Danny Rick. And while I doubt he was like, I'm going to crash both of these cars off of the track, it is a possibility that could have happened. if Danny had been a little too reactive, if he had, honestly gotten scared, if he hadn't seen him, if he had just, if he had overcorrected, you've just finished your entire race. You're tired. These are professionals. They know what they're doing, but it's not an expected or even reasonable thing to do. So it's a really dangerous maneuver. And I think you saw the difference between experience and maturity when you see Danny, like, kind of hold himself back of what he wants to say. He says literally on the radio, like, I'll save it. The guy's a helmet.
Because like he knows that like it's a public radio that he's on right now, and like it does not look good to just like lambast your teammate on that.
Yeah. And people do. And I think, it is what it is. I like Danny a lot. I think he has just ironically, for a guy who like has a lot of sound bites of talking about his balls and all these different things, like, and he just has a little bit of class when it comes to like the way he approaches the sport.
I think he's matured a lot, like since his Red Bull days, especially because like there was a time when like he would just shoot off at the mouth, but I think he's really calmed that back. But I think it also just comes with age as well.
Yeah, I agree. He's getting older. He's in his 30s. Like, I think he's kind of there's some good footage of him in Drive to Survive this season as well, which
I haven't finished it.
Oh, really? I think
no.
I mean, it's not like you've already seen the race. Like you already watched the season. It's not like you're like waiting for spoilers. But the thing I do like about Drive to Survive is we do get like a lot of kind of clips of the drivers talking in like these talking head positions, and a lot of their attempt to sort of do the reality TV thing where they're trying to explain to you what's happening because you're only getting a small cut of it. And from that you do get a lot of these like moments where I think they're kind of, you get a little bit more vulnerability of like what they're thinking, which we don't get when we're watching the race and post race interviews. So it is a nice space, and Danny does have in his like hero edit of returning to the sport because he's the producer's favorite. I think you get this little clip of him, which I think is early on, but he basically is talking about like, I'm 34. I don't know how much longer I'm in my 30s. I don't know how much longer I can do this. Like, I am coming up to the end of my career, but I don't feel like I'm done yet. And I think his saga since he left Red Bull and not having a seat last season, like, I just really think like I think he's taking time. I think that is probably what he needed to mature. And I also think that that's why he might end up in that Red Bull seat, even if Checo performs well, because I think they're looking at this and they're saying like, we did have the right team in Max and Danny. Danny just wasn't ready to be Max's teammate yet.
Daniel wasn't ever like, I think at the time, and I think Drive to Survive at the time really does a good job of explaining this. Like, he didn't want to be Max's second driver. He wanted to be a world champion. And I think he thought he could be a world champion at Renault. And he thought he could be a world champion at McLaren. And I think he kept moving teams to try to find the space where they would prioritize him.
Yeah.
Because even then, like, Lando was so new that, like, technically you could have, like, thought that they would prioritize him.
And I think if he had performed better, he might have been prioritized. He just was not. I think he was really trigger happy at the time. Like, I think moving from Red Bull to Renault was very much an ego move. I think if he had stayed at Renault, there was a possibility that they could have built it. They were really on the upswing. I don't know that he would have ever been a world champion with Renault, but I think
I don't think so.
Had more room to
They would have been a solid midfield team.
Yeah. And then, I don't know. I just think
at Red Bull.
If he'd stayed Red Bull, he still wouldn't have been a world champion because they weren't going to put him over Max. But I think it's been 2 seasons at Renault, 2 seasons at McLaren, and a season with no
one
seat.
off season.
Yeah, it's been like a full 5 seasons of accepting and swallowing the bitter pill of the fact that, like, as the field stands right now, you're not going to be a world champion. So do you want to be on a team that wins the Constructors' Championship, or do you want to keep kind of moving around and
it's like, where are you going to support versus where are you going to lead?
Yeah. And I think it's a bitter pill to swallow. I can't imagine what it would be like to be like, I'm good enough to be here, but not good enough to win. No matter where I go,
that's hard.
It's a rough one, but I do think at VCARB, he's in a position where he is the leader. He is the person who has a better race, who has a cooler head. And I think there's been a lot of conversation about like how Yuki's being portrayed, but I do genuinely think like Yuki's had problems with every teammate he's ever had. And at
He
a certain
has
point,
not
that's your
helped
problem.
himself.
Yeah.
Like even though he has a really great friendship with Pierre, like there has always been some sort of conflict with him and the other driver, and it's just and like to be fair, Liam wasn't there long enough for there to really be conflict.
But he was complaining about him. There's this level of like we have team radio of the couple of races that Liam was there, and to some degree, it always feels like it's because he's being outperformed.
The other part, yeah.
Because
like I think he knows that he's very vulnerable in this situation because like as much as I don't want to think that he's just there for like the Honda deal, like he kind of is, maybe a little bit. And so like at the end of the day, like once Red Bull transitions into Red Bull powertrains and Red Bull is moving to Ford, like what is their real need and reliance to keep him there if he's having issues with the other team members? They can just put Liam in that seat and bring up somebody else new. Red Bull does not care.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like Red Bull cuts their losses, like very clearly. We know that. We've seen that with Nick. We've seen that with Alex Albon. We've seen it with Pierre. Like that, and that's just the last couple of people off the top of my head. Like
if you're a liability, they will cut you. And like he's becoming a liability. Cause like even like moving in a cool down lap, you are a liability in terms of like just like wasting money in that regard. If you would hit him, that's a waste of money.
Exactly. I think honestly my gut feeling, and we'll see how the season goes, but my gut feeling is next season we see Danny move up to Red Bull, we see Liam come in, and we potentially see Yuki get swapped out for either a new young driver or someone else that they're going to want to keep around to see how they move around. Yeah.
I see that. Because they have a long roster of people to choose from.
They really do. And I think a lot of people want that seat, and that's the hard part about you can't behave in this way when your seat is a coveted one. It would be a little bit different when you're talking about like a Williams seat or you're talking about Alpine seat. Like, okay, you know, it's not the most coveted seat on the grid, but being in that Red Bull team, I mean, the Red Bull organization is a coveted one.
There are 20 seats, and if you step out of line, regardless of who you are at any point, they can, like, you will get dropped because there is a laundry list of talented drivers coming up behind you who can and will take that seat in a heartbeat, regardless of even which team it is. Because, like,
exactly,
like Oscar and Alpine, like that, and McLaren, like that was a quick decision. Like he was ready for that seat, and they just had to deal with it.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I think we'll see it. I think it's a bummer. But yeah, I think this race itself was a kind of an interesting opener. Like we've got the entire grid. Normally you see a little bit of like space in between teammates or kind of moving around, but we've got the entire top half of the grid was the same 5 teams, and the bottom half of the grid was the same 5 teams. So we had Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren, and Aston Martin took points, and Haas, VCARB, Alpine, Williams, and Stake took none. So it sort of gives us a view of where we sit at the start. It'll give us a very easy progress report by the end of the season to see how everybody does. Do you have any predictions of which teams you think might make it out of the bottom half of the field?
I actually think Haas and I think Williams will score points pretty early on.
Yeah.
I think for Williams, Alex especially will score points here and there. I think Logan will definitely get a couple points. And then for Haas, like, especially Nico had a really crap first lap yesterday. And I think if he hadn't had such a bad lap, he probably could have scored points.
Yeah.
Because he got hit and he needed a new front wing, and then you've lost all of your momentum at that point. That's it.
Yeah.
So
I think we will see VCARB also move up, like at least for Danny. I think we'll see him kind of move into the points more often than not. So I think things will shake out a little bit, but at the moment we know which cars are performing well.
Yeah.
So the last thing from the race, we started talking about this before we started recording. And I think it's important because I think there's like sometimes we should talk about the fandom elements of this sport and how much it's grown. So if you haven't seen the clip, Charles didn't have a bodyguard at Bahrain and was very much kind of overwhelmed, let's say. Mobbed, yeah. And
because
it's
doing the fan
unacceptable.
pit walk.
Yeah, I think so. I think I just saw the clip of him being sort of like bodily moved through this group of people.
Because they do all this fan stuff when you're at the race, and like you have the opportunity to meet the driver sometimes if they come out and talk to you. And it was a situation where he should never have been in that situation. And it's happened a couple times, especially to him, I've seen.
Yeah.
Where like people have just overwhelmed him.
Yeah. And also, I don't know if you remember, this was years ago, but he had to put out like an Instagram story because people had found his address in Monaco and was like, look, if I see you on the street, I will like, and I think this is a reasonable ask. Like he was basically like, if I see you in public and you stop me, I will take a picture with you. I will sign something for you. I love fans. I'm also obviously paraphrasing, but he basically was like, if you see me in public, I'm happy to stop and talk to you. Please stop showing up at my apartment. I'm not going to come out of my house. It's a violation. And like, I am intrigued about this sort of like, I almost want to call it like the boy bandification of the fandom. Like there are lines being crossed lately. And I think it's hard. I think it's a difficult thing to look at and say like, there is a space for you to be a big fan of these people. There is a space for you to kind of idolize and be, it's a public figure. It's a larger than life type of situation. And I get that you want to be, like we're talking about Lewis Hamilton. Like he's our best friend. Like we don't know him. We love that he drives a car really fast. Like, so there's that. There is, and that's acceptable. That's a normal thing to do. I think when we cross this line into like safety, I don't feel good about it.
I think like I've been thinking about that as well, like the boy bandification, like especially with your video about like the Venn diagram of people who are One Direction fans, F1 fans, and
Teen Wolf fans.
Like, I remember being a One Direction fan. I was Harry and Zayn, but like it took on a life of its own, and it was actually to a point where it was never okay. And I think hearing the way that like Zayn talks about it now is like as he's gotten older and he's come back into the public spotlight, and like hearing about how much anxiety it gave him and like how people were just crossing lines of like privacy and boundaries was just not okay. And it was never okay. And I think you're very correct in what you were saying about like how like the groups of people kind of have flown into one to the other. And I don't think F1 was expecting as much of an increase in fandom size very quickly from Drive to Survive. And as much as like people like take a hit on the show and like try to bring it down a lot, like it has massively increased their revenue. It has increased their popularity, the drivers' profiles, and it's generated a ton of money and attention for the sport. And none of us can deny that. And it was a great opportunity for them. And it's done what it was supposed to do. At the same time, it has, by bringing it into people's homes and putting the drivers and their faces and like kind of giving us like a little window into their lives, it's almost created a little bit of entitlement to be more involved than we really should be as fans. And I think we didn't learn from One Direction and how it can harm people and cause them anxiety, but also push them out of the things that we love watching them do. Like Zayn left One Direction in part because of that entitlement and the fan attention. And I do think that some of the drivers would do similar things. And I don't want that for them. I want them to stay around and drive for as long as they can.
Yeah.
But I also don't want them to do that at the like expense of their health and physical well-being.
I think Drive to Survive has done a lot for the sport. I think it's really opened up the personally I think it's a good thing overall. Like if we're weighing good and bad, like pros and cons, I think Drive to Survive has been a good thing for the sport. I think it's opened up a lot of people who would not normally think I should watch this sport and found an interest. And I also think like generally speaking, the best way to get someone into sports is to get them to connect to one athlete, because that allows you to have that same connection and to root for someone, and that gives you a reason to spend money on tickets or to go to races or buy merch, all these different things, right?
Yep.
And Drive to Survive lets you do that because there is like that talking head version of things. It also isn't perfect. They leave a lot of things out. There were a lot of things in this past season that I was like, oh, they didn't talk about the Austin double DQ. They don't talk about like Oscar winning a sprint race. If you watch Drive to Survive and you never watch the sport, you would never know that there is such a thing as a sprint race, right? Like they're not covering everything.
What?
Yeah, it's actually wild. But it's also, okay, they only have however many episodes, 8 or 10, I can't remember. 8, yeah. So they only have so much time to cover. They're also obviously recording a documentary while people are trying to run a real organization. So there's only going to be so much access and time they have.
And BoxBox is a small team of people as well.
Yeah, like, it's a very small
massive
team.
organization.
No. And I think the other thing about it is it isn't just the Drive to Survive effect. I think a lot of people like to say that this fandom has grown just because of Drive to Survive. I think there's also been a really big increase in F1 content creators over the last few years.
Yes.
And style of where that's coming from and like that community building. And you're seeing like the One Directioners that have grown up and are some of those same people are talking about F1 now. Like you and I are both F1 content creators and we both come from the era of kind of Tumblr
One Direction.
Yeah, One Direction and like fandom. So there is, I think this sport is a sport that has typically been watched by an older generation and people who were following that from a family aspect and from a higher socioeconomic class due to the expense of things. And also from mostly a European fan base. And now you're seeing that expand and become much younger. We also know like last season was 40% female that watched F1, which is huge, 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 huge. I think it's up from 8% 3 years ago.
Yeah, it is. And like, there's one other thing I think when you're talking about content creators, like not only have they made a massive marketing push to the US like creators, at the same time, like because more women have gotten involved, because more female content creators have gotten involved, there's also a range of people who are doing this who are really diverse. And that's not just like the two of us. Like I can name like 10 people off the top of my head who have done really great content, who are all very diverse women of color, who have made it more accessible and more inviting for a sport that's typically very white and very male.
Yeah.
And like when you finally start seeing people like you in a sport, like I used to play soccer, and so like or football for my like Europeans, like, and I remember seeing like when I was a kid and I was growing up, like I played from the time I was 4, but there were a couple of like women of color on like the U.S. women's national team, and like there were a couple queer women on there, but like when I started seeing women who looked like me on like the U.S. women's national team, and like even with like the women's soccer leagues, like granted some of that was just because I was in the US and they didn't like platform it a lot.
Yeah.
But like once you start seeing people who look like you, it honestly it's like a switch flips for me at least.
Yeah, I agree. I think like the more, especially like when we can talk about how fandom has changed too. Like fandom in the One Direction era was very much Tumblr, which was not faces attached to it. We're talking about TikTok and Instagram and YouTube now. And now you're looking at content creators who are saying, I'm a fan, and they're fans that look like you, and you understand that there's a space for you in this fan space. And I think the internet allows you to kind of like niche down. So I always notice this every time I have a video that gets outside of my niche where it does really well. And you're like, oh, hi guys. So the fandom as a whole still has like work to be done, I think, for sure.
A lot.
But there is this space of like the girly pop energy coming in. There is a space for those people. But I do think there needs to be some boundaries starting to be drawn to understand that, like, okay, when you go to a One Direction concert, there are security guards, there are barriers, there are spaces. And I don't know how much, I think a lot of that's on the fandom. I think some of it's on the teams or not the team, really just like the organization of F1, of Liberty Media, to recognize that these things have been, that this fandom has changed in a very fast way. And there needs to be security measures. There needs to be an understanding of what needs to be done here.
So I think the fandom can take like accountability for itself, and like we can like tell each other like, hey guys, like don't. And I think even like when I was watching the video with Charles, like there were a lot of guys who are older in that thing. And I think part of it is also money that can be made. And I think people are really like seeing, because like I remember when Lewis announced he was going to Ferrari, even on like Vinted and eBay, those vintage style Ferrari jackets, they went from like $25 to $175 within an hour.
Yeah.
And like I think people are doing this also partially because they're like, if I get a Charles Leclerc signed cap, I can sell that for like $2,000 online, which is ridiculous. Yep. And I think people need to recognize that these are still human beings who still would like to like go to dinner and not get mobbed and like overwhelmed, or like have people camping outside of the hotels they're staying at for a race.
Yeah.
And I think that's ridiculous if people are doing that, which some people are.
It is. I think I think we have some work to do. I think like anything that grows this fast, there's gonna be some time to like, we got to take a step back and figure out the right way to do it. You know?
Agreed.
But I think overall, like, I do love the changes that we've seen in the fandom. Like, despite this moment specifically, I think overall I love like we also have like this podcast also has a Discord server, and like you can join it and talk to other people who are kind of fandom centric and enjoy the sport. And I love connecting with the other people on the internet that are fans of the sport and fangirls and want to enjoy it. Like I woke up at 7 a.m. to go on our group chat and talk about like just a live chat on the race, and having that like kind of group chat energy for something like this is really exciting. Like I grew up watching sports. I grew up playing basketball, and again, it's like a sport that doesn't really feel like there's a lot of people like me that love it, or like women like me that like want to talk about it. And you're seeing that start to change. And I really do think it is what you were saying, which is like content creators that are becoming more diverse make people feel more like accepted, make them feel like this is a sport that's for them. So I'm a fan of fans, I guess. And I do love that it's something that's starting to bring people together, because like getting to meet you on the internet just because we both love F1, what a world that we live in to be able to do that.
I know. I love it. It's like, I think about the people I've met through this, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
Like I'm super grateful for it every single day.
Same. Well, let's talk about season predictions, and we'll close it all out because we've got another race coming up this weekend.
Oh gosh.
Saturday.
Oh, no.
I know. Another Saturday race. When I will say the one thing that we do know for sure, Alpine's terrible performance resulted in 2 resignations. The head of aerodynamics and the technical director post that race.
What?
Yes. So I think that I don't know. I think Alpine's gonna have a rough season. I think if we're already at a point where it's that bad, they don't think that they can recover.
I don't think they can. I think they're gonna end up 10th in the Constructors' Championship.
Yeah, I think big sorry to Ryan Reynolds.
Someone was saying that this is like going to pave the way for the Andretti buyout, and I was like, is Andretti really going to come in and buy them out after this?
I don't know about a buyout. I think Andretti wants his own slot.
His own team.
Yeah. I think because I think I think Alpine has gotten a lot of star power, so to speak, lately. Like in the same way we're talking about like the fandom of F1 growing, you're also seeing like the celebrity outside of the basics of like people just going to races. You're seeing celebrities invest in teams. And Ryan and Rob were one of the 2 bigger kind of investments into Alpine lately.
Because it was one of a couple of football players as well. It was like they own like 20% of the team now.
25, I think.
25.
It's like the investor group owns 25% of the team. I'm pretty sure. And
it's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a big chunk. It's a lot of money. And Ryan and Rob specifically stand out to me because they also bought Wrexham Football Club.
Yeah.
And we've seen what they've been able to do with that. And I'm wondering how much of a silent investor they're willing to be, or how like I think it's an investor group, so it's like, to be clear, Ryan Reynolds does not own 25% of Alpine. Yeah. He's part of an investor group that owns 25% of Alpine, but we've seen him and Rob kind of like take this TV show element of making a sports documentary about Wrexham. They won a number of Emmys this year for last season. So they've taken sports and made them successful as well as surrounding entertainment around it, which I think is a really interesting move. And I'm sure follows like the Drive to Survive effect, I think did not only bring fans into the sport, it's also bringing different types of investors into the sport. Yeah. And so with Alpine's downfall at the beginning of the season, I am curious to see what happens with this investor money, because I don't see there being an excitement to continue investing into a team that is this rough.
That bad.
Yeah.
Like it is, like the way that last season, like the amount of heads that fell at the end of the season, like I don't think this is a sustainable situation.
Yeah, agreed. I just
and I wonder about Pierre and Esteban, because like why would you want to stay at a team that's like actively going backwards?
Agreed. Yeah. So I don't know. We'll see. I think that's going to be, I think it's sort of sealed. It's not going to be a great season for Alpine, but it'll be interesting to see what changes are made, what drama comes out of it, that type of thing.
What are your predictions for Jeddah?
Okay.
What am I going to see next week?
Yeah, what are you going to see next week? Let me tell you. Let me open up my crystal ball. No, okay. So I think we're going to see a number of drivers that feel like they have to prove themselves for various reasons. Oh. And I'm not sure if that means that we see dangerous racing or if we see good racing. So I think Carlos obviously has a lot to prove, right? I think Carlos is going to continue to put himself first, I think, in a way. I think at a certain point that's going to come to a head for the team orders and moves throughout, because they obviously are going to be prioritizing Charles, and we'll see how that goes. But I think Carlos is driving for a seat right now. Like Carlos is putting on the biggest resume. So I think we're going to see him continue to be competitive. I think we're also going to continue to see Max win by a large amount of time. Unless for some reason, like someone breaks into the garage and the engine falls out during a race. I think that's the only chance we have of a non 20+ second win.
To be fair, Jeddah Corniche is a street track, so I could see it not being as far ahead purely because you can't do track limits.
That's
and like
true.
Not that Max was doing track limit violations, because he didn't get a flag the whole time.
Yeah.
But like when you're on an open track and the end of that is not just like a concrete area, you can go a little far over.
It's true.
So, like, I think he might. I'm saying like 10 to 15.
Okay. I like it. We should start. I feel like those are going to be the new bets instead of like who wins. It's just like by how much, like over under 20 seconds. I think we'll probably still see. You think under? I'm going to say I think we're over. I think we're at least at 20, but who knows? Who knows? Who's to say?
I do think someone else will get pole.
I agree with you. I think we've got really good single lap pace from a number of cars that it's possible to see a Ferrari pole, or maybe
I could see Checo.
Yeah, I could see a Checo pole. I don't know, actually. I think Checo has kind of proven that he can't drive the car better than Max, even in a single lap situation. So I think we'll put it in now.
Only because it's a straight track.
Yeah, true. I say my pole position, I'm going to give it to Carlos, actually. I can see it.
Yeah. I guess that was one of mine as well. Like Charles or Carlos.
Or Carlos. Okay, you heard it here first. We're pitching a Ferrari pole for Jeddah. And then I think we're going to see a little bit more of a shakeup in the qualifying of the grid. I think we're not going to see like every team kind of split directly in half.
Boom. Yeah.
I think we'll see Alpine in the back, per usual, but I think we'll see some moves.
I agree with that.
How do you feel George will perform? Do you think he's going to fall apart?
I think George will do pretty well.
Yeah.
I think he will probably, I'm going to go 4th or 5th.
I see that. All right. I'll agree with you.
I don't think he can compete with the Ferraris right now. I don't. And
no.
I think he gets really in his head sometimes when he's like in these like high pressure moments. We saw it in Singapore, and like I think he might just fall apart a little bit on accident and end up falling back a little bit further when he doesn't need to. So I think he does really well in qualifying. He does really, really well when it matters in terms of like single lap pace. But then when he has like to make high pressure moments count in a race, I don't think he'll do it. I think it'll be like 4th or 5th.
I agree with you.
Sorry,
Sorry, George. We hope you prove us wrong. We'll give you that.
Please prove me wrong.
And I think we'll see Lewis continue his I don't work here energy, to be honest with you.
He's given his resignation letter. He is gone. He's here for the vibes and the Black Arrow situation at Mercedes.
Yeah. I think it'll be interesting to see. For me, I hope at some point he sort of is like, okay, I guess we'll race. Like, but I think
he'll pull it together eventually.
Yeah, but not this week.
No.
Yeah, I don't think it's coming this week.
I think he'll especially pull it out for Silverstone.
Oh yeah.
Brazil.
Yeah.
I think he'll go big or go home. I think he'll win a race. Do you think he'll win a race this year?
It remains to be seen just because of the car, not because of his energy. I think I'm giving him a little bit of flack. Yeah. I think at a certain point, it's sort of like when you go to see a horror movie and at a certain point it's too scary and you just start laughing the whole time because you're like, I just need to release my energy. I kind of feel like that's where he is, where it's it sort of seems like it doesn't matter what I do. I show up, my butt falls through the seat while I'm going 100 miles an hour. And
he was having a great time explaining that story.
Yeah. It's I work here, I guess. I think at a certain point, his desire to win will outweigh his distress of where he's at. But I also think it's hard to push through when there are better skies in your future,
It's is Ferrari better skies though?
I think so.
I'm slightly scared for him.
So look, I don't know that he's going to win another championship at Ferrari. I do think he's going to feel more respected. I don't know what happened that made Toto sort of flip, but I really think in the last couple of years, when you see the comments that Toto's making about Kimi Antonelli, and you're seeing the fact that he's I wanted to keep that spot open. You see the fact that Lewis said, I want Valtteri to stay, and Valtteri was gone. And you also have him saying at the beginning of last season, I said these things about the car and everyone told me I was wrong. And I kind of took a step back. Okay, so for a period of time, I don't know when, I don't know why, but for the last couple of years, there's been a clear
shift,
disrespect, just a desire to not. He is, in my opinion, to so many people, Mercedes. He is the name, he is the brand, and for some reason they've decided that that's just not the case anymore. And so
for them to just the whole thing about the brand ambassadorship, none of that made sense.
No,
all of it was none of it. Someone who's won you 6 constructors titles, that's not okay to treat him that way. And even if you don't give him the funding for Mission 44 or any of his other stuff, which I don't even think was on the table at that point, he just wanted the brand ambassadorship.
Yeah, I think the big, I do think the funding for Mission 44 was a big deal to him. And I think the thing about the Mercedes move, the Lewis Hamilton issue here, is that Toto had the ability to do everything that Ferrari did for him. He chose not to. And I think
and the Mercedes board as well was not in support of it. And at some point it's how much can he do for you until he's worthy of that? Someone who's brought millions, if not millions of dollars to your team.
Yeah.
Well,
and you see it just from the stock soaring from before he even confirmed when he moved to Ferrari. Lewis brings I don't think there's a question that Lewis brings extreme economic value to the teams that he is a part of and to the sport overall. And I think you look at these stories that come out about the calls that he's able to make and these changes. There was the reporter who just came out and gave the story about how he was interviewing her. Or they were doing an interview and he asked her about her comfort at one of the hotels, and she mentioned that she was concerned about the fact that she couldn't use the gym or the pool because it was a gender separated, women were not allowed at that hotel. And she got an email the next day saying that basically Lewis had made a call and that was not the case. And so I think you look at someone who has he is the only Black driver in the history of the sport. He is making an effort to try to, like, he has an entire foundation where he's trying to change the diversity of the sport. But you look at the fact that, like, he's overcome what he's overcome. He is one of the greatest drivers of all time. To me, the greatest of all time. Like, I really do think he has the numbers. The numbers don't lie. And you look at the fact that he has made Mercedes, like, Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton is the most successful partnership in the history of F1. They've won 6 drivers' championships together. And you look at this dynasty, and it makes no sense to me unless something that we don't know happened. I don't see why you give up that type of power to potentially take on an untested rookie.
Like, Kimi is going to be great, and Kimi is going to be an amazing driver. I am fully confident in that. Like, you see it now, he's driving in every series he's been in. But, like, at the same time, like, there's a way of how you handle those things. And it doesn't mean you have to get rid of Lewis. It doesn't mean you have to get rid of George. Or it doesn't mean that you even have to, like, not keep the seat open for him.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, Kimi's not ready to move directly into an F1 seat of that caliber. No one is.
Yeah.
Like,
well, and also, like, how much more valuable is it to have Lewis there? I'm sorry, but, like, if you're looking at Lewis or George, which one's better to train a rookie in that nature?
My vote would be you put him in a Williams. Sorry, Logan. Or like when Alex leaves, like, you put him in a Williams, and then he can help train him from there. And it's not perfect. He's still not in the same team, and you can't, like, work with him directly, but, like, or you, like, as your reserve driver, he does extra work with Lewis, and, like, he, like, really helps train him to be a driver. To, like, Lewis isn't going to drive forever. Lewis is not going to pull a Fernando Alonso and drive for, like, the next, like, eon.
No, like, when I was at Coda, he said 5 years. So I think, like, that's what you've got left. And I think Mercedes had a chance to sort of, like, use him to continue their legacy, and instead they're choosing to completely blow it apart and rebuild from the bottom. And I think also, I was listening to an interview that Toto did. It was talking about, like, he basically admitted that he didn't make an effort to try to convince Lewis not to leave. And
that's ridiculous.
But if you listen to him talk about it, what I think happened ultimately is, I really think it was ego that got in the way. Not, I think on the side of Toto, because if you listen to him, he says, I've never tried to get anyone to stay. Like, once you decide you want to leave, then you want to leave. And it's like, sometimes people want you to tell them that you appreciate their presence.
It's like a relationship. You have to tell people how you feel sometimes. And you have to give them the reassurance that you want. But, like, doing a 1 year plus one extension with an exit clause, like,
that tells me you don't want me here. Like, that tells me I've worked here. Like, I think it's just, there's no way.
I'd be playing the field left and right, just like he did.
Exactly.
I would not be waiting around for them to just make a decision and cut me at the end of the season.
Yeah, I think in terms of predictions, like, not even just season prediction, just overall prediction, I think we are about to watch a really bad stretch for Mercedes. I think after Lewis leaves, I hesitate to say that they're even fighting for second in the Constructors' Championship.
I don't think that they will. I agree with that. I don't think they will. And, like, you can kind of see it in how yesterday went. You can see it in, like, how they were talking about the car before the season started, and, like, even last season, like, when they didn't show up for those, I know there was some other stuff going on at Singapore, but, like, you can't come back from that.
Yeah.
And it's like you were saying, like, the disrespect. And I don't think Ferrari will do that to him. To be fair, Ferrari did do that to Carlos yesterday, but, like, I don't think that Ferrari will maintain that same level of disrespect, even if, like, Charles is il predestinato. Like, I don't think they will do that to him.
Yeah.
And, like, I don't think Mercedes will have anything figured out. I think they're really focused on, like, the future, when they really should be focusing on, like, how do you win another championship and not end up in another Red Bull era? It's like, no, you're thinking about, like, 5-10 years, and you really should be thinking about right now.
Yeah. It does make me think that Toto has given up on beating Red Bull and is trying.
I think so.
I think he's trying to plan for when Red Bull has to make their next, like, shift, basically, in strategy. Like, if Max leaves, or if there's some changes.
He's planning for 26.
I think so. I think he's really trying to look out and see, like, okay, next season, how do we bring on a driver that, he's apparently rumored to be talking to Sebastian Vettel, which would
Yeah,
be
I
fun.
saw that. I'm like, it
Yeah.
doesn't make sense.
I just don't see it. I mean, maybe I'd love to see it, obviously, but I just don't think it's going to happen. But I think they're trying to decide, like, he even said, like, after a couple of races, we'll have to decide, do we go for experience or do we go for youth? And I think you might see him go for youth. And I think that's a move. That is a move that says, I'm willing to lose the next 2 to 3 seasons for the possibility that Red Bull slips up and we're ready to be a better team.
Yeah, exactly. So. And like, but the problem with that is like, you have to now contend with a McLaren that has Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. Like I said this a while ago and I'll say it again. I do think that Oscar can win a race.
Mm-hmm.
Will win a race sooner than Lando, because I think he's kind of figured out this whole tire degradation thing as well. Like if yesterday was any indication, he didn't just like fall off midway through the race like he did last season.
Yeah.
Like I think he's figured that out. And like if he qualifies well and he does a pretty decent job, I think he could very much so win a race with Lando.
I hope for Lando's sake that doesn't happen. Not from like his seat, but just from he has such a hard on himself energy.
It would be
it would just be too much, I think. So I do hope, I think he's a very talented driver that often does not recognize how talented he is. And so I think
exactly
that happening would not be good for him emotionally. Yeah. But I do think it's possible.
Like if they go for youth, you now have to contend with a very young McLaren team. You have to contend with a Ferrari team that Lewis will eventually retire. Charles is young.
Yeah.
And they have a laundry list of people who want that second red seat.
Yep.
You're going to be contending with an entirely young field because like all of the drivers who are going to come off the grid at some point are all at the same age point. So they're all going to come off at the same time. And it's like, you can pick youth, but when you pick youth, you're now contending with everyone else who's also done the same thing.
Agreed. Yeah. And I think you're so right. Like, I think we see my like long-term prediction is we're going to see Ferrari have whatever seasons they have with Lewis, because I believe he signed a 2-year contract with the opportunity to renew as well. So I think
it's 3.
Is it 3? I think it's 2 and 1.
3. Yeah, I think okay. Yeah, it might be 2 and 1.
Yeah, so
it definitely takes him past 26.
Yeah, it does. So I think you've got time with Lewis, and I think in that time they hope to see Lewis win his 8th, and I think they hope to see. I think Charles has said, there's a lot to learn from Lewis. So I think
he said that.
Yeah. So it's like you're looking at what you would have liked to have seen from George and Lewis, but I think you'll actually see it here, which is that Charles will support Lewis winning another championship and learn from the best person. Everything. He'll learn everything. And then Lewis will retire. He'll have given the team enough support for Charles to win his championship with whatever young person they bring in to support him. And then Charles will be in a position where he can become dominant. You'll have someone young. And I think Ferrari hopefully then brings themselves back into the dominant and
contention
like space. Yeah, I think it'll be a big shift. I think they've made the right moves. I think Fred Vassar knows what he's doing.
He has really made a massive shift for that team, and like the amount of people that they brought in, the people that are coming next year, it's going to be intense.
Agreed. Last prediction. Where do you see VCARB finishing? Do we see Danny Rick getting into the points at Jeddah, or do we see him just moving forward, or do we see him and Yuki crashing?
I don't see him in the points. I actually can see them crashing.
Yeah.
Like, I can see them crashing. I think that they'll finish outside the points.
I agree with you. I think my pitch is, just off of the limited information we have, 4 races for Danny to hit the points. I think he'll have the car underneath him by that point.
I think it'll be like maybe Australia.
Yeah.
Home race, first points.
I could see it. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with me, Jordan. This was so much fun.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
If you want to join us, if you're watching this and you want to hang out with me, if you want to not watch the races by yourself, if you want to gossip We have a whole channel for that on our grid chat. So you can join by going to tandonproductions.com/grid chat. If you fill out the form there, I will send you an email with how to join. And you can follow Jordan on TikTok. Jordan, what is the username of which they can find you?
So on TikTok, it's Jordan Taylor C, Taylor, and then no periods. And then on Instagram, it's the same thing, but then a period between my first name and middle name. So Jordan.TaylorC.
So definitely follow Jordan over there because I really love the way Jordan talks about F1. I think I'm talking about you in the third person as I stare at you, but I'm talking to the audience. I really love the way Jordan talks about F1 because I think Jordan has a very clear way of speaking, very clear opinions, and also like an accessible way to speak. So if you're looking for someone who knows what they're talking about, but also kind of feels like your best friend sort of FaceTimed you, I would say that's Jordan, and you should follow her. Yeah.
That's literally what I've been going for. So yes.
So follow Jordan, and you can follow me at Marissa Kumari, which is my middle name too. I guess we're both first and middle name screen name people.
Yeah.
Love it. And you can
It's a Tumblr thing.
It is. It absolutely is. Wow. Memory unlocked. I think it was a stranger danger thing for so long. Everyone was like, don't put your last name on the internet.
And now we're all just like, whatever.
Yeah, I love it because I'm like, I'm your host, Marissa Tandon, and you and you can find me. Anyway, so yeah, you can find us both on the internet. You can join the grid chat at tandonproductions.com/grid chat. And if you are listening to this podcast on Herd FM, you can find me in the community section so that I can talk to you as soon as you finish the episode and we can chat. You can find me on there. My username is actually just my first name there, at Marissa. So find me, we can chat about the episode. And we've done it. We have covered the first race of the season. It's I always want to end this with like something cheesy, like it's lights out and away we podcast.
That's so perfect. You have to do that.
Okay. All right, everyone. 3, 2, 1. We're ending the episode. It's lights out and away we podcast. Thank you for joining the grid chat.